CCP sees American business in China as hostage to be used for its own purpose. That was my first lesson of China business. Rule of the game are whatever the party says, what they are at that moment. This is my third and last story, a personally very sad and bleak one. In September 2017, Whitney was disappeared by the CCP state. For 4 years, no one heard from her, not her parents, not I, not our children. She only reappeared on the eve of publication of my memoir, Red Roulette. She called me from the same phone number that had been deactivated for 4 years to ask me to cancel the book release. Moral of the story: political power trumps everything else in China. CCP is above the law in China, and Xi Jinping is modern-day emperor on top of the CCP and the state. Last but most importantly, I will stress the importance of safeguarding American economic interests in this competition with CCP China. One needs to make a clear distinction between corporate interests and national interests. What's good for corporate America is good for America is a myth that's proven to be questionable. Corporate management, as capitalism dictates, is driven by self-interest and short-term in nature. The deindustrialization of America and the wholesale relocation of supply chain to China in the past decade are a testament to that. In democratic societies and countries, elected officials should be the true guardians of national interests and the long-term well-being of its people. I believe it is very important to keep that in mind when you are presented with advocacy of re-engagement, reapproachment for corporate executives. I believe economic interest is national interest. Defending American economic interests and American leadership in the global economy is defending economic order of the democratic world. Thank you.
Mr. Kazi wants us to bring all the major asset managers in front of the committee. I suspect they're not going to be eager to come and ask them some questions. I suspect they'd also disagree with your analysis that China is no longer a good place for long-term investment. What aren't they seeing, or is it willful ignorance on their part?
Well, I think it's one of it is a lot of them now in the last few years has been investing into China, setting up companies in China, and they're raising money in China. And then the CIC, the China Investment Corp, the state-owned, essentially central investment fund, has been investing into many different companies, those funds. So they, in a way, their hands are tied. They have, conflicted interest.
In your book, you recounted an argument with Whitney where she wanted to keep investing in China, but you wanted to invest outside of China. In fact, you wrote, quote, "The party thinks nothing of confiscating property. What the party gives, it can take away." Mr. Shum, obviously, your wife was arbitrarily seized in 2017. But if you fall on the wrong side of the CCP, your assets can be arbitrarily seized. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Because of this arbitrariness, and I think in your written statement you said that there is no rule of law in China, it turns out that a lot of people are voting with their feet and leaving China. The Washington Post just recently said that 300,000 people left China last year, which they called a brain drain, and China ended up being the world's #1 exporter of high net worth individuals, with almost 14,000 millionaires leaving last year. It turns out money is leaving the country too. I want to point you to a chart about Hong Kong. If you could put it up on the big screen too. In 2020, as soon as the CCP imposed the national security law in Hong Kong, which restrains various freedoms there, including the right to even criticize the CCP, investment in Hong Kong plummeted. You see that, right, Mr. Shum?
Yes.
Why did that happen in Hong Kong?
Hong Kong become one of the major wealth management centers of the world over the last decade. The reason is all Chinese money. It's people like us. We always have this fight in the past is how much do I put money outside so is saved from the CCP and how much you invest in the growth economy. So with Xi Jinping, he basically, well, the China's economic model has run its course, and then his policy exacerbated the issue. And so people are running with their money at the moment.
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of folks have been arguing, well, some, including Derek Scissors, who's a colleague of mine, has been arguing for a long time to have a reverse CFIUS in place, right? And some of this outbound investment stuff is supposed to get at that, although this is supposed to be very minor compared to what a reverse CFIUS would look like. Look, there's always going to be industry pushback, but the job of Congress needs to be, as I've said, I think earlier tonight, to increasingly specify what the red lines are, to increasingly specify what the threats are. That clarity in the long run is actually a good thing.
So, and maybe even if that's done by executive order, Congress, do you recommend Congress maybe codify that?
I think folks in Congress have some expansive ideas. I think a debate needs to certainly take place around what a stronger version could look like.
Mr. Shum, do you have an insight on that as well?
I think two things to say. One is actually direct investment fund into China, fundraising of it is already collapsing. This first quarter, China raised, foreign investment into China is 20 billion. Last year, first quarter, is 100 billion. So it's a drop of 80% and compared to COVID year. So direct investment to China is collapsing. The second thing is while US is looking into restriction, actually China is doing the same thing. They are restricting foreign company to investing into their own high-tech company because their view of national security. So there is a push on both sides actually on this issue. And then to illustrate that, I think that is the reason Sequoia, which is the biggest venture capital investor in China by far, is separated. They separate into a China unit and an American and India unit, and China unit will only do China. So there is a force pushing on this from both sides. That's interesting. I think I do think the Chinese economy is sinking. So in the short term, everybody's issue is how do I diversify my operation? And then it's reglobalization minus China. So that's in the short term. I think in the medium term, everybody is looking, so how bad is where the Chinese economy is going to go? And then the heightened risk of the Taiwan Strait, how do I de-risk that issue? And I think long-term wise, I think everybody, I mean, to be frank, I think, you look at globally, Europe is in its own mess. China with Asia with unpredictable and menacing power, creating waves in Asia, all the capital is coming to the US. So I think, you talk to any major large investors, they are looking at basically, how do I allocate, bulk of my bets are in the US, and I will do sporadic bet based on growth market opportunities.
This was American companies now. The fate of American companies in China. Is that what you answered? Was that your answer?
Yeah.
Okay.